Man accused of destroying a satanic temple display at the Iowa State House in December is being charged with a hate crime. Michael Cassidy, a former congressional candidate from Mississippi, was originally charged with fourth-degree criminal mischief. Court documents say the cost to replace or repair the property is between $750 and $1,500. They also show that the act was committed in violation of individual rights under Iowa's hate crime statute. Both pieces of evidence bring the charge to third-degree criminal mischief, a Class D felony. Cassidy is set to be arraigned on February 15th.
This is a call for vengeance. Welcome to today's show. Some of you may remember about a month ago, even though those channels have been wiped off the face of the earth, I covered the story about a man who went to an Iowa Capitol building and decapitated the statue of the Baphomet. Because again, this is something that they've been doing year in, year in, year in, year in, year in, and year out. Okay? They don't stop doing this because they're doing it by design. They are putting up these satanic displays at Christmas to gaslight, but also to press the issue of removing all forms of Christianity off of public buildings, off of state buildings, off of schools, anything in celebration of Christmas that has to do with Jesus. They will put their satanic Baphomet statue there so that they could say, look, if you can have Jesus here, we could have Baphomet here. And then they have to make a decision about whether or not they want the Baphomet there. And the only way they'll remove the Baphomet is if they remove any traces of Christianity. That's what the Satanic Temple is doing. Now, I get it, and I've talked about it. We all know about Christmas. It's not really the birth of Christ. It's celebration of winter solstice and Saturnalia. But that's a different topic for a different day, which I've covered many times over. Okay? This story needs to be known about, not because I'm going to sit here and celebrate the decapitating of the Baphomet, because of course I would celebrate that day in and day out. But you have to look at these stories for what they really are. These stories aren't out there because they want to say, hey, look at this guy who decapitated the Baphomet. Let's all cheer. The story is out there because now we could see what the agenda was behind it. The man who destroyed the Satanic Temple altar in Iowa has been charged under hate crime law. So this is what this leads towards with Christians. Any display, any action against any specific group will not be protected for being a Christian. It'll be considered a hate crime. The Satanists are protected under hate crime laws. That tells you where we're headed. Are Christians protected under hate crime laws? No, they're not. Who's living proof of it? You and me. Our free speech is not protected. Even if we're talking about things that are in the Bible that are forbidden by God, that are blasphemous to God, that are disgusting acts to God, if we talk about it, it's considered a hate crime. Christians are not protected under hate crime laws. Ted Pike did a video on hate crime laws 4 decades ago now, back in the 80s, early 90s. Hate crimes are put in place not because they care about protecting people. It's about removing your rights. It's about removing free speech. And we've gotten to a point where hate crime has filtered into almost daily, day-to-day life for regular civilians based on words that they use that people are offended by. They continue to, it started off with words, which is what they were doing for a long time with words like the N-word. They were gaslighting people with words and trying to get people to say, oh my goodness, if somebody says that word, if somebody calls somebody an it ends in ag, okay, that it's a hate crime. Now we're at a point where you can't even say something, I'm sure, against the Baphomet. That's what this will lead towards. Now, as I read you this story, of course, the alt-right media jumped on this story and they covered this story and celebrated this story as the alt-right media would do, because there's lots of agendas and gaslighting behind this stuff. These people who are probably wolves in sheep's clothing who cover these types of stories are covering it for a different reason. They're hurting their audience in. I cover this stuff and I've continued to cover it because we have to look at the fine line with these stories about Christianity's and Christians' freedom. Okay, our freedoms are being removed. They want Christianity wiped off the face of the earth. So they do things like this. So they make you pretty much go, okay, what are we going to do? They say, well, based on religious freedom, the Satanists are allowed to be here if the Christians are. So Christians need to make a decision. Are they going to allow these after-school programs that have Bible studies in their schools? If they are, then we're going to allow devil worshipers in the school. And Christian parents end up having to go, okay, well, I guess we'll allow it. So either young children and their liberal parents are going to let their children go to Satan programs after school and indoctrinate them with all sorts of things that are gateways into the occult, like Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of other stuff. Of course, it's really about behavioral control. They're pushing LGBT. They're pushing a woman's right. These are things that the Satanic Temple is all about. They're all about going after anybody who claims to be a victim of satanic ritual abuse and to try to protect it and say that's not a real thing. They go after anybody who's against women's quote-unquote reproductive rights, aka women's right to murder. And of course, if you disagree with the LGBTQ+, if you disagree with kids castrating themselves, of course, you're a horrible person and you need to lose your rights as well. So those are the things that they're trying to protect. Now, what's so unbelievable about this that you don't hear them talk about is that the Satanic Temple claims to be a religious organization, right? So hate crime laws is something they'd be protected under. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because the definition of a religion, let's go over the definition that they put in Google, right? Because that's, pretty much what's running everything, right? The belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods, a particular system of faith and worship, a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. So why is that important to know? Well, the Satanic Temple claims that they don't worship Satan, that they don't worship a superhuman or a supreme being. They claim that their whole thing is based off of political ideologies and human rights and human freedom. Of course, it has nothing to do with that. Quite the opposite. Because Satan is the one who is enslaving humanity through all of these systems that they're trying to normalize. These people are trying to obviously use their organization to remove Christianity off the face of the earth. And it's working. Because we've seen this. I covered this 7 years ago, about how the Satanic Temple was showing up places and they were demanding that, because they were doing things under the name of God, it's, whether it was like a, in your local township, if you had a town hall meeting, etc., and they would pledge to God or say something, they wanted to go there and hail Satan. And they said, well, if you could say God, we could say Satan. It's religious freedom. And of course, little by little, everybody's gone along with it. They've got desensitized to it. And now they allow this stuff to happen all over the country. We see how many schools the Satanic Temple is popping up in. I covered this and people told me I was out of my mind. They would never go forward with it. It was a publicity stunt. Oh yeah, look how many schools have the Satanic After School program in it. How did they get those programs in there? Well, the Christians they can only go into schools where there's after school Christian programs. And that's all that they target because they want them to remove the Christian programs out of the schools. Period. So the Christians get put in a spot, the school gets put in a spot where they say we can either have Christianity or we can't. And ultimately it's about removing all of it. Because eventually they don't need the Satanic Temple because the one world order, the new world order, is going to be satanic worship. And people aren't going to realize that they're actually worshiping Lucifer with worshiping self and all this stuff that they've normalized in our society. Okay, this all goes into Freemasonic teaching, secret society teaching. So let me go into this article that's out there about the man who destroyed the Satanic Temple altar. And again, remember the gaslighting things that they're going to use with this because it was a Christian veteran. Okay, this works into the whole Civil War stuff that they're trying to do, trying to say, and the Democrats are doing this by design because they want to separate. They want to separate the two and have the Christians and the Republicans as sitting ducks for all sorts of attacks, cyber attacks, attacking the gas line because of course we know the red states are all going to be using gas. They're not going to be going electric. They're going to force them into that stuff. And of course, potential with Trump and the persona that he plays into going into war with China. So this is all scripted. This is all planned out. And these are the tactics they're using. They're using all sorts of tactics to lure people in. So this guy goes and destroys the bathroom. We all can look at it and say, that's great and wonderful. Yeah, but it makes national news for a reason, right? They're putting it out there for a reason. And then they come out and they say, hey, a Christian beheaded the Baphomet statue and all the Christians are excited about it. Well, guess what, Christians? You're going to get charged with a hate crime. This guy who's a veteran is going to get charged with a hate crime. It's a perfect gaslighting tactic. That's what these things are. Remember, psychological operations. Doesn't mean that it didn't really happen. Obviously, when the story occurred, my first instinct is that this was a setup and plan, and I believe it still is. Obviously, you send a military guy who's obviously taking orders, a younger military guy who, these people still take orders from, they're under severe mind control, a lot of people in the military. Okay, if you're out there in your military, that's not something you should be offended by. Okay, I'm sure through all the stuff you've been indoctrinated with in the military that it's a mind control operation. Look at the new version of the military. Why do you think they're doing all this stuff with woke in the new military? So they could grab somebody from the military and have them go and do this. Or they could just grab a regular actor and tell him that, hey, he's a Christian military guy. And again, that drives people crazy. So the man who attacked and beheaded a permanent statue put up by the Satanic Temple at Iowa's Capitol in December has been charged with a felony under the state's hate crime statutes. Michael Cassidy, who is an unsuccessful Republican candidate for Mississippi State House of Representatives, is charged with third-degree criminal mischief in violation of individual rights. And again, I mean, well, let's look at this. And of course, a satanic statue wouldn't in a normal society be allowed anywhere. Why? Because it's not protected under religious freedom. Because what is their religion if they claim that they don't actually worship the devil? Now, if they claim that they actually worship the devil, well, that's a whole new can of worms. Then we look at and evaluate the teachings of Aleister Crowley and the stuff that's in their real books that they do, which involves human sacrifice. And then the majority of human beings say, well, this isn't a religion. This is criminal. You should be killed, arrested, etc. And that's the route that we go. Instead of saying, oh, we're not really devil worshipers. Oh, okay, so then how are you protected under hate crime? How are you oh, you're a specific group. They claim to be a religion, but you don't worship a supreme being. So can we get some answers? Of course not. And I'm sure they might bring attention to this in Congress as a gaslighting tactic and sit on the House floor like they always do, get eyeballs on them and do nothing about it. And pretend, oh, Christians are victims. They're victims to this satanic cabal. And they are. But they're going to be just as much victims in this new conservative red state movement that they're creating by design. They're going to be victimized there. They'll be sitting ducks. Again, it's very, very concerning to me. So, goes on to say, evidence shows the defendant made statements to law enforcement and the public indicating he destroyed the property because of the victim's religion. Cassidy, who's 36, had been charged with a misdemeanor. The enhanced charge is a Class D felony under Iowa's hate crime statutes. Cassidy ran for Mississippi House District 45 as a Republican, but was defeated in November by a Democrat, 55-38. His campaign biography describes him as a former Navy pilot and a Christian conservative who loves our nation. That's how you know. Those are the talking points where you know that this is obviously a psychological operation started by our government, because they want to link Christians to conservatives to nationalism. This is being done strategically by design. It doesn't mean that Christians like us don't believe in, nationalism in a sense, right? We don't want a new world order, but it doesn't mean that we're patriots. These are all trigger terms that they're using as herding mechanisms and, of course, as mechanisms for mind control to turn Christians into the enemy of the state. And it's working. Okay, so Cassidy appeared on Fox News days after he beheaded the statue and called it Christian civil disobedience. He said he went to the Capitol and nobody was there and it offended him. It touched a nerve, he said. It was, righteous indignation. These are all terms, just like I covered with the trucker convoy. They're using scripture, twisting scripture to saying God is calling them to go and do this at the border, using Bible verses to make it sound like they're calling for violence. This is one where we're seeing them use the same thing here, right? Christian indignation. Oh, God called on him to go and behead the Baphomet. Okay? Cassidy said on Fox News he pulled his head off, referring to the display of Baphomet. Minister of the Satanic Temple of Iowa told NBC, at the time, the vandalism of the display that was there for the holidays, the Iowa Department of Administrative Services said the group met with application requirements for the display, said all religions have equal rights in the public forum under the First Amendment of the Constitution. As Americans, we have every right to be here just like everyone else. And again, here are the fine lines you need to know. All right, the Satanic Temple is protected under religious freedoms or religious rights, even though they claim they don't worship anybody. Okay, they're more of a political group, and movement is what they play the role as. Now we know they're all Satanists. The reason that they're a religious, have a religious exemption and are protected under religious rights is what I covered 5 or 6 years ago. They became tax exempt in like 5 minutes. Okay, they applied for tax exemption to be a 50C3, whatever the heck it is. I always get the wording mixed up on it, but anyway, they applied to be religiously exempt, and Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, green-lighted them when they went past the process that everyone else had to go through, and immediately were protected under these rights because they knew what the plan was with that temple. I talked about the founders of this temple, their connections even to things like the Franklin cover-up. Okay, these people are dirty. They've gone through the intel agency. A lot of them have gone through the Ivy League school programming. Okay, they get put on TV. Fox News puts them on TV. This is all done by design. This is a government operation. You wouldn't be putting these people on Fox News and then allowing them to speak and sound smart instead of putting them on TV and embarrassing them like I would do. If you put me on television with the head of the Satanic Temple, I would run him over like a freight train. It would be within seconds. He would either be crying, he'd be embarrassed, he'd be beat red, and I take it to another level. Okay, they wouldn't allow that. They always put these guys on national TV with these Fox people who sound like buffoons when talking to them. They sound obnoxious when talking to them. They don't go, hey, how are you protected under religious freedoms when you don't believe in the devil, right? So who's your deity that you believe in? Oh, well, we believe in equality. Oh, it sounds like you're just Democrats then. How are you a religion, right? We don't go into any of that stuff. They just use them to gaslight the audience out there. So the article, I just have to read this part from NBC News. It says, Baphomet is a winged creature with a goat head, and references to it include when the Knights Templar were accused of worshiping at Philip IV of France, according to its entry in Encyclopedia Britannica. Philip had members of the Knights Templar burned at the stake over allegations that they were loyal to the Pope, than their king, and because Philip was under financial duress and the Templars were wealthy, according to the blog on the subject on the website of the National Archives of the United Kingdom, the Knights Templar worship Baphomet. This is where the stigma of Friday the 13th comes in. Okay, Friday the 13th should really be celebrated. Friday the 13th, because that's when all these Baphomet worshipers were handled and taken care of. Now, they try to say that that's all, make-believe and that's fake news. It's the truth of the matter, okay? And it continues to this day with Baphomet worship. Now, I love how they say Baphomet's a winged creature with a goat head. They're leaving out the part that Baphomet has breasts and a penis as well, because then you could start tying that into the ideologies that are being pushed on the United States of Babylon. I mean, America. So these are stories we need to know about. The underlying message, right? Hate crime, hate crime. Who's protected and who isn't, okay? And the removal eventually of protection for Christians. That's what this is leading towards. We're not going to be allowed to be anti-LGBTQ because the Bible says that. If you reference the Bible, you reference even, men wearing women's clothing and women wearing men's clothing and how this is disgusting in God's eye. If you reference that, that'll be considered hateful, okay? They're going to use the Bible as, a way to get people to remove the Bible by saying all these things are hate speech, all these things in the Bible lead to violence, they lead to the world problems. They want the Bible removed, okay? And that's what our job is here, is to fight not just for the Bible to obviously be allowed, but to be accessible to people, because it'll be removed from public libraries. Soon it'll be removed from places like Amazon. It's true. It's what we're headed towards. I'm not saying what the timeline is on it, but that's what the messaging is here. Satanists are protected under hate crime laws and Christians aren't. Christians know this. So if this gets gaslighted with the left-right divide with the civil states, Christians are obviously going to willingly go to these conservative states because they're going to want rights and freedom. They're going to want to be protected. That's why the government's going out of their way to put these stories out there about Satanists being protected and Christians being persecuted. They're doing it as a gaslighting tactic. Is it true? Of course it's true. Of course the wicked people in power hate Christians. But guess what? The conservatives in power hate Christians too. That's what you need to know. If you knew that these people like Trump were pretending to work you, to herd you, if you knew that they were anti-Christian too, then there'd be a Christian revolution. But instead, they're seeing the Democrats go out of their way to smash Christianity, to mock Christianity. It's making Christians angry, and rightfully so. But they can't think further than that. They don't realize that all these people like Ted Cruz, these talking heads in the Republican Party, their goal ultimately is to destroy Christianity as well. And when you get all these Christians herded into states as Christian states, well, you're going to be sitting ducks, because then they're going to this psyop will wear off, everyone will be divided, and then Christians will be sitting ducks for potential world conflicts. And ultimately, that's what it's going to lead to, because Christianity is what is under attack. And now when they have you herded where they want you herded, well, we're going to see more and more of it. So don't fall for these stories and the gaslighting behind it. Christians should not put their emotions in towards the Republican Party. They do not care about you, and neither do the Democrats. They both don't. The Republicans are using this as a tactic to get you where they want to get you. They're gaslighting you. I thank everyone for being here. Again, if you didn't earlier, make sure you check out my podcast. I had mentioned I started a podcast over on Spotify and over on Podbean. So make sure you check it out if you haven't yet. You could just type in the name of my podcast there and you'll find it. I thank everyone again for being here. Hope you're all well. God bless you as always, and your families.